So anybody can put some sentences in the chat, and I'll probably just look at like the first two people or the first person. And we won't be long, you know, to be short. I know y'all pretty busy and stuff, but there's a lot of information in this little talk. So, all right, so I'm going to go to screen share and we will get started. Okay, so it's called Writing Sentences That Feel. And the reason why I'm focusing on sentences here is because oftentimes, like as you know, writers and big storytellers, we have a lot of big ideas and, you know, we want to tell our story, but I think often the stories are told on the sentence level and at the word level, like they build the atmosphere and they tell stories better than we can sometimes. So that's why my focus is here on sentences. So before any of your big ideas get heard, this is where it's at, you know, this is the dirt. And there are a few sentences I will share that have some violent images in it, and I'll note those in case anybody wants to mute me before, you know, in case you don't want to hear that mess. So before I read those, I'll like pause for a moment and let you know so you can mute me and I can shut the hell up. All right. Writing sentences that feel. So the word sentence shares the same etymological roots as sentiment, as sentient, as sensual. And it's from the Latin sentire, which is to perceive, feel, and know, physically and emotionally. A teacher once told me that as a writer, you have a choice to write a sentence that describes a drowning or to write a sentence that feels like drowning. How do you get your writing to cling to readers' nervous systems? Can you make a reader feel like they want to vomit by using these phonemes repeatedly? GKT. I think you can. So we'll cover the basics of a few strategies that will help our sentences feel like what they're describing through three main categories, which is movement, it's the syntax, sentence length, how a sentence moves in or contains space, texture, which is images and other sensory data, and sound, from cognitive linguistics, which is how sound evokes mood. Okay. So the first sentence here is, so we'll look at movement now. So although it is very early, the wealth of the day is upon him. He is running, he is listening to Monteverde, and he is running. He is very muscled and lean. He lopes along hungry as a wolf. There is something regal about the canopy of leaves above him. The sun has only just lifted over the rim of the world. And that's from Ricky Ducornay's Netsuit. So looking at this sentence, like what is it communicating and why does it feel the way it does? So she's using repetition to reinforce the feel of footsteps while looking upwards. Mm-hmm. So here's this repetition here. It's he is running, he is listening, he is running, he is very muscled and lean. So she's talking about running. So this repetition here is feeling the footsteps, you know, like he is. The sentence is kind of marching along as she's writing. And she's using anaphora here. For anyone who's not familiar with the term anaphora, it is repetition at the beginning of a phrase or sentence, like Martin Luther King. You hear it in a lot of political speeches, like MLK's speech, I have a dream, such and such, such and such, I have a dream, blah, 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 blah. And epistrophe here is the opposite of that, is repetition at the end of a phrase or sentence. And you hear that in Obama's speech about something, 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 yes, we can. Something, 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 yes, we can. And for anyone who don't feel like taking too many notes, I'll send this out. This document will be available So you don't, it's a lot of mess in here. So if you don't feel like writing all this stuff down, you don't have to. Um, so let's look at this anaphora here. He is running, he is listening to Monteverde, and he is running. He is very muscled. So it's a lot of like passive verbs behind the he, and then he lopes. So after all the repetition, we still get like this half of repetition, but it takes off with lopes. He lopes along hungry as a wolf. Then there is something regal about the canopy of leaves above him. So then the view, the camera switches upwards. She looks at the canopy of leaves and you can see everything. Like we know it's the morning already. So you can kind of see like stippled light coming in through these canopy of leaves. Like it feels nice. Like it feels good here because of this lighting she added in. And then she zooms even further out with the sun has only just lifted over the rim of the world. So right here we have this very like horizontal movement. If you think of any movies you've seen where there's like a dolly tracking shot, Wes Anderson does it a lot. So he tracks along with the subject. So you get this, he is running, he is running, he is running. The sun is just lifted over the rim of the world. I mean, regal about the canopy of leaves, and then even wider to the rim of the world. So I think you feel like the wealth of this day, like you feel good. And it's because of the structure, the length of these sentences, the repetition, the direction, and looking upward. And this is also similar to holy buildings. Any holy buildings that you go into, I think I may have mentioned this, but when you go into any holy buildings, universally, they make you look up. They make you look upwards. All the stained glass is upward. You know, like there's that feeling of looking upwards to God or whatever higher power. Interesting that it's called higher power. So looking upwards. You feel good in this sentence because it makes us look up, you know, and it feels like it's running. Okay, here, next is in Pale Mall Inn, behind the night sheds, little pink clouds come tippling down, and huge yellow maple leaves, not cold enough to turn red, tumbling on regrowing November grass to lie like yellow hands. And that's from Gail Scott, The Obituary. Up above, that was the opening sentence to Ricky Ducournay's novel. And this is also the opening sentence to Gail Scott's novel here. So just something to think about, like how it opens in this beautiful way. And this is, the sentence from Gail Scott is sort of the inverse of Ricky Ducournay's. So it uses a long sentence to start with a wide landscape, and then it narrows down to the leaves also. So sort of the opposite here, but it says something different about the landscape and the feeling that that landscape gives you. So in Pale Mall Inn is a neighborhood, so it's very abstract, you know, behind the night sheds, a little less abstract, but still, you know, little pink clouds come tippling down. So we're up in the sky, and then we move downwards. Here she's using this tippling, which Microsoft Word would correct anybody for doing that. But for the sake of this feeling, she uses that, you know, regardless of whether the grammar is correct or not. Huge yellow maple leaves, not cold enough to turn red, tumbling. So now we have, like, we're down, and then we have another horizontal movement. Tumbling on regrowing November grass to lie like yellow hands. So the movement here is different. It stops. This end of the sentence stops, like not just in period, but the image stops, which like is reinforced by the ending of a sentence. So you get a different feeling from the downward movement, the horizontal, and then stopping. So this novel starts off a little differently, but there's a different feeling, maybe like something isn't right. You may feel stuck in this place. So before the rest of the novel goes, like this sentence here tells you, like you get this feeling from being stopped because of the syntax and the image. Okay, now I'm going to move to texture, and these are some of the violent sentences. So I'll stop here for a few seconds in case anybody wants to mute. Okay. All right, texture. After he shot himself, my grandfather's face was a spangled bouquet that made grass die. Even when they took his corpse away, his head was still there, some soaking into the ground, some in liver-colored strips and bits unable to be absorbed. It looked like the oversaturated pile of womb waste on the floor between my sister's legs after she gave birth. And that's Sela Sederstrom, the Pink Institution. So here, like thinking of the texture of the images and the texture of the sentence itself. So after he shot himself, that's already, it's terrible. There's nothing, it's just like plainly spoken and it's terrible. My grandfather's face was a spangled bouquet. Spangle is like those very little sparkly things in a bouquet. So she's using something that's usually like that's sparkly and full of life and beauty to describe death. Not saying that this author loves death, but it just gives you something with the different textures here compared with shooting. All right. Spangled bouquet, like bright, sparkly, then that made grass die. So we're back down to this other like brown, gray image. Even when they took his corpse away, his head was still there, some soaking into the ground, some in liver-colored strips and bits unable to be absorbed. So that we get the liquid of it soaking into the ground, and then liver-colored. Liver is very like texturally, people love it, people hate it. It has a distinct texture. So liver colored, instead of like red strips, and all of that, like liver, to use a thing that's very textured in place of a color, as a color, liver colored strips and bits unable to be absorbed. I highlighted this because I'm going to come back to it with the sound discussion. So it looked like the oversaturated pile of womb waste. Here we go, like oversaturated on the floor between my sister's legs after she gave birth, which is another like narrow thing opening like between my sister's legs, similar to the bouquet up at the top. So we have these images reinforced with legs in a bouquet, life, like waste is dead. My sister gave birth, so there's death and life. And then there's also death and life here, but it's all supported with these very like textural images with heavy texture and different textures. So yeah, the sentence always messes me up because of the content itself, but how she like imposes these images of life, death, ugliness, beautiness, sparkly, grossness, all of these things mixed up into one, like is a complicated image, which reinforces these emotions, like these complicated emotions going on here. And it's not saying like, oh, I'm happy my grandfather was shot in the head. It's just, I don't know. Yeah, it's hard to describe other than what these images are doing in the textures that make you feel this stuff in your mouth, in your mind, and you see all of these images. And she is the teacher who told me that you have a choice to write a sentence that that describes a drowning or that feels like drowning. So to see her write this sentence that feels like what it is in this thing is good for me. Okay, so now we're going to move on to sound. And is a quick note on a portion of cognitive linguistics. And cognitive linguistics is a huge field, so I'm not asserting that this is all you need to know about cognitive linguistics. So this is just like a small part of a part. All right. And this is also why I think a lot of fiction writers should read and try to write poetry, because of sound wise too. Um, or everybody, I shouldn't just say fiction writers, nonfiction writers, anybody. Okay. So in his book, What Makes Sound Patterns Expressive, Reuven Sir talks about why we perceive certain vowel sounds to be dark or light. He says it's because when spoken, vowels have a frequency. So before I get to this, we do perceive things to be like, ooh, that feels dark or that feels bright. And it's a lot of the time because of the vowel sounds. We perceive those sounds as dark or bright. So the ooh, as in food, chew, you, being the lowest frequency. So we associate low frequency vowels as being dark, foreboding. All right. Then the as in jug, blood, cut, being the next lowest frequency. Then the E as in he, she, keep, being the highest or the brightest frequency. So we associate high frequency vowels as being bright. Um, the neutral sounds that we don't perceive as dark or bright are the short ah and eh sounds in bet, bat, set, cat. People who play music know this stuff. It correlates to music, you know, like dark foreboding sounds as that dun, 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 dun. Like it's frequencies. That's why they feel dark or bright to us, or happy or sad, because of the vowel frequencies. Uh, Low notes, you know, low notes feel heavy and dark. Um, okay, so I'm going to use one of my sentences because I knew what I was doing intentionally here. All right, so for vowels. In the alley, a bloody-mouthed raccoon gnaws on a white baby shoe. It stands on a mattress with piss stains, a yellow blob of chicken fat traced by a trail of ants. The chicken fat slugs along a mucus path. A batch of flies pile on the exposed red tendons and bone of a deer leg severed at the knee. So here I'm loading up these few sentences with a lot of low frequency / dark vowels, which I have underlined here: bloody mouth, raccoon, gnaws. And I did use choose up ahead, like, so choose would be a lower frequency than gnaws. But after this N here in raccoon, if I would say raccoon choose, the CH sound would like pitch it up, like give it a higher pitch and make it sound brighter than what it is. So I wanted to keep these sounds tamped down. And because I'm country, gnaws sounds better than choose to me anyway. Like gnaws that's the word for it. It gnaws on the shoe, not it chews. Choose is nice, and you know, and sound wise, gnaws also carries that like deep, that low frequency vowel. Stands on a mattress with piss stains. So like these are kind of like all neutral sounds, not really like high up. Yellow blob. I could have said yellow piece of chicken fat, but piece is not, you know, blob is better for the sound as dark as it is or gross. The chicken fat slugs. And we get lucky, right? Like, how cool is it that the word slug for slug is slug? That's the word. Snail doesn't do that animal justice. Like, I could say it snails along, but slug, it's that U sound that does the work for it. Slugs along a mucus path, a batch of flies pile on the exposed red tendons and bone. So we get lucky. And I do want to say, like, we do a lot of these things intuitively too. So I want to say that I should have said it up front, but we do a lot of these, especially with sound wise, because we hear, like, when we talk to babies, we make our voices higher because it sounds nice and it makes them happy. We want to appear like less threatening, like, hey, baby, hey, you know, so we do that in our writing too. It's in us. But knowing when to use it, like when to push it further, is a good tool to have. And this story here I have is only like a paragraph long. But at the end of this, I start using like higher frequency vowels. I say like the rays are poking through fog, tinting things, and like pitch it upward so it feels a little happier at the end, but it's still like juxtaposed with all of this like foreboding vowels. So a lot of like, where can I put a dark vowel that still works here? Okay, now I'm going to move to consonants. Consonant, there are a lot of consonants, as we know, and I'm not going to cover all of them. But you can research. You can look in any linguistics book, wherever you want, and research liquids, plosives, fricatives, and glides. Liquids, during the discussion, like how do you make something feel like it's drowning, right? Liquids are M's, L's, R's, and you think like how it feels in your mouth to say those words. Like they are kind of, there's a reason why they're called liquids. So if you're writing something that feels like it's drowning, can you put a lot of M's and L's and R's in that sentence or in that passage, and it will have a like more submerged feel? Plosives, which a lot of people are familiar with, P's and B's, they pop. You pronounce them with both of your lip, bilabial, both of your lips. So I'm gonna go back up to plosives here with Sela's sentence here. We're all talking about a gun, a shooting, a popping, and these brain matters, strips and bits unable to be absorbed. So there's a lot of popping in your mouth when you say those. It's full of plosives. She could have said pieces, even though pieces starts with a P, like with the plosives, it's not as plosive of a word because it has those two syllables. Pieces, but strips and bits, strips and bits is more plosive than pieces. Pieces and scraps, like there's so many other words can go there, but these feel like the best words for this moment. Strips and bits unable, there's still a B to be absorbed. So there's a lot of plosives in there, in that sentence. And glides, and you can look up glides too. Okay, so more consonants. Another one of my sentences, because I knew intentionally what I was doing. I flipped the groundhog over. Its full belly jiggles to a spread like a rubber hot water bottle. So what I'm doing there is like, I wanted this sentence to jiggle. And luckily I had the word jiggle as a guide. Like, how do I get this sentence to jiggle? And I've seen people read this sentence and will like do this movement when they read it. Like, oh, like when I've tested it out on people, like, hey, check this out, read the sentence, and they'll do this thing. So that let me know this sentence was jiggling like I wanted it to do. But I'm using multiple words with double consonants and two-syllable words to reinforce the feeling of jiggling. Full belly jiggles to a spread like a rubber hot water bottle. Like you have to say these things over and over and they just keep tumbling. And people usually ask when I give this workshop, like, but if you're reading in your head, yes, you can still feel it, because most of the time we've said these words before, we still feel them just the same reading them in our head than we do if we would say them aloud. Flip the groundhog over, its full belly jiggles to a spread like a rubber hot water bottle. It does it. Water kind of has that sound too, like especially surrounded by these other like double consonant two-syllable words. It kind of takes on those sounds too. And also the image of a hot water bottle jiggles, right? So like the form here, I mean the content is being supported by the sounds is what I mean. Like getting the sentence to feel like what you need it to feel like. So that's it for like the basics of like movement, texture, and sound. Just some short things. And now I'm going to go, oh, I forgot to mention before I get here, fricatives. Fricative is like a forced air through a narrow opening, like V's and F's. They're right? Like those sounds have an application. Those are fricatives, which I have another sentence coming up here shortly. Okay, so here's go through like a revision from one of my friends in my writing group. Read the original, then I'll read the edited version of it, and then talk about how some of the choices that I made to get there. Um, Her head began to swirl under the claustrophobic. What am I doing? Her head began to swirl under the claustrophobic weight of the bayou heat and those constricting memories. Unable to stop what was coming, she emptied her stomach into the wastebasket next to the bed. And that's from my friend Emma Arlington. So revised, I didn't mess with the first sentence. And it seemed like a very simple revision, but we'll talk about it. Her head began to swirl under the claustrophobic weight of the bayou heat and those constricting memories. She vomited into the empty wastebasket. So this was basically the only thing I changed, and it's simple, but I'll explain why. Okay, so the phrase here, unable to stop what was coming. I think this phrase weakens the force of the action in the moment. So you can cut this entire phrase and let it happen on the page. And what I mean by letting it happen on the page is, like, maybe ironically, if you say unable to stop what was coming, it feels like you can stop it from coming because there's a lot of words. Like there's a lot of space between bayou heat. I mean, there's a lot of space between constricting memories and unable to stop what was coming. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 words until the vomit comes. So like you can stop it from coming, even though you can't. Even though you're saying she couldn't, like it feels like you can stop it. Um, so cut that phrase and just let the vomit come. Like if it's in your mind, it can't stop it. Just let it happen in the syntax. Bump that vomit up, straight up to the moment. She vomited. Bam, there it is. Those constricting memories, she vomited. It's right there. You can't stop it from coming. There's no need to say it. It's there. And then emptied her stomach, I feel is also weak for this moment. Vomiting doesn't feel like just emptying your stomach. That sounds nice. Vomiting is terrible. I hate it. It's a gross thing. It's also weak, and it's a euphemism, which doesn't feel as forceful as what it's describing, which is why I replaced it with the word vomit. Vomit. Emptied her stomach versus the word vomit. And as a lucky bonus, the word vomit is sonically on point for this action. So V is a fricative, which is forced air through a narrow opening. And then vomit ends with a T, which is a voiceless stop. So to me, that feels perfect. It's forced air ending with the voiceless stop. That feels like vomiting. So we get lucky. The word vomit feels like what the fuck it is, right? Like it does its job very well. And that's what we need to pay attention to. Like the words that do their jobs already, let's use those. Um, and these things are like very writerly things to do up here. It's like unable to stop what was coming, emptied her stomach, like super like writerly things to do. And that's not always the best thing for the moment. All right. Next to the bed was the other thing I cut. Saying it's just not important information here. Plus, it weakens the sound and visual of the sentence because after wastebasket next to the bed, my eye travels back to the bed. So by cutting it, you make the reader focus on the vomit in the wastebasket. It stays there. Vomit in the wastebasket. If you say next to the bed, that's like giving the reader an easy out from that vomit. Like, no, you need to continue with this vomit in this wastebasket. Stay here for a few seconds, And then there's another sound bonus. And you get to end the sentence with the TKT phonemes in wastebasket. And that reinforces that vomiting sound, like there's some sound matching going on. So I think you get more image concision by cutting out next to the bed, and then which is contingent on the previous sentence. And just to talk about wastebasket real quick, I think about the class of words sometimes. Like what I mean is like, is this word bougie or like a certain class? So I feel like wastebasket, like I wouldn't necessarily say it in some of my writing or my characters, but wastebasket fit that character. Like I would say trash or something like that. And like trash might be a better fit there, even though the sounds may not have the K and the T sounds in it. But so also like consider the class of word with the sound, with the character. So sometimes like we don't need to vomit in the wastebasket. Like wastebasket might make it sound nicer, like we vomit in the trash, or like or the garbage or something, right? Like the class of words can also substitute whether the sound not quite matches up or not. So there's something to also consider there. Uh, oh man, I had a sentence. What happened to the sentence that I had? Oh man. Oh well. That was another sentence that was good that is not on here for some reason. Okay, anyway. Well, that's the